Hello and welcome to The Voice of Iron, and in this session, we'll be reading Dreams of Rain, Tape 9. It had been 3 nights since they took me in. During those evenings, I'd had plenty of time to get familiar with my surroundings. My simple fold-out pad for a bed, the shower tube/toilet in the corner, and the cold, dark steel door to my cell, the faint glow of the red EMAG shield on the window, adding to the dim illumination of my room. The rest of my new home was illuminated solely by a thin neon strip that ran all 4 corners of my holding cell, casting an eerie, astrus-purple light over the featureless gray metal walls of the prison chamber. I sighed, laying back in the bed once more, staring blankly at the ceiling, hearing only the faint hum of an air vent somewhere else in the facility. Some part of me was wondering why I didn't get up, why I wasn't screaming or doing some desperate, insane escape attempt. But I realized soon, as I had realized often these past few nights, that it would be utterly pointless to do so. It was all just pointless. It's funny. People like Mark and Bill had it right all along, in a sense. None of them would ever feel the disappointment I was feeling right now. They accepted their lives. They never tried to grow beyond what they were given. They were content with the life laid before them. If I'd just been more like them, maybe I wouldn't have been feeling so disappointed. My first night in the cell, I was furious. I'd been so close, so very, very close to freedom, and I blamed Mark for betraying me. But I realized later that Mark was just an Astra's tool, a pawn. He chose to fall in line. No matter what happened, Astrus would have found me, and they would have stopped me. They always find a way to stay on top. The second night, I tried thinking of an escape plan. I tried working out how to get out of that place, but each plan had a critical flaw. I knew nothing about messing around with EMAG shields. I didn't have nearly enough knowledge of plumbing to rig up something with the shower parts. And even if I tried something insane, this room was probably being monitored. As for when I got out, what more could I do? I risked everything to finally be free. And what happened? Astrus was 2 steps ahead of me the whole time. There was no point in fighting him anymore. That leaves night 3. It must have been a few hours after waking up when there was a knock at the door. I didn't say anything. Whether I did or not wouldn't matter. The visitor would do whatever they came here to do. "Hey, buddy," came an all too familiar voice. Lazily, I rolled my head over, not bothering to sit up, just staring at my guest. Mark, sitting on a small stool he brought in, dressed up all nice in his Astrus patrol uniform, with a fancy new rank pinned on. I didn't bother commenting on it. "How are you feeling, Kitt?" he inquired, his tone soft, calm, almost remorseful, but still professional. "Doesn't really matter," I replied plainly. The silent treatment would have just kept him here longer. May as well cooperate. "Look, he began, a desperate look crawling onto his face for a brief moment before he allowed it to slide off, disappearing with a quiet sigh. "I'm here to ask you a few questions. They thought it best to send me in to talk to you," he finally stated, that signature Mark calm returning to his voice. I just nodded in response, slowly. My eyes still drooped sleepily. I wasn't tired per se, just drained. "Well, first question they want to know. Why did you steal the drive?" Normally I would have been upset. I told them I didn't steal it, but instead my malaise remained. I spent $30,000 on the drive so that I could have something to leave the colony with. Had this dream of being a stellar vagabond. Just wanted to be free, I explained, plain and simple. He took a moment to tap on his forearm, which, I assume, was recording and broadcasting this chat elsewhere, now that I knew it had that capability. "Next question," he began, with the barest hint of hesitation. "Have you, recently or otherwise, stolen anything or otherwise committed theft in Novus?" "No," I stated, delivered with a sigh. "Now, Kitt, I should warn you that Astrus will find anything—" "Mark," I interrupted, raising my voice enough to catch his attention. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes staring into mine. "I've never stolen anything," My tone seemed to convince him on that point at least, as his mouth opened for just a few seconds before he closed it without a sound and nodded. Next up, have you ever purchased any contraband or shopped in any black markets? If so, what did you buy and from whom? He continued, his tone shifting to a somewhat softer one, though what exactly that indicated I couldn't read, and honestly didn't care. However, his question did force me to think for a moment, and luckily he seemed to give me as much time as I needed. The basic conclusion was the same. No matter what I said, Astris would find out everything. Probably already knew and just wanted confirmation. But that aside, I had just learned a valuable lesson in betrayal, and I owed it to old pals like Jago to at least keep them out of this for now. Yes, I've bought a couple of illegal nav tapes. They had maneuvers in them that Astris outlawed a while back for safety reasons. My ship could handle them, but the law doesn't make exceptions. Right, Mark? I inquired, making direct eye contact with him as I said so. His face didn't show it, but his eyes were those of a man just stabbed. Where did you get them? Names, please, he asked, but not with much force. I can't remember names. All those shops in the Undercity look the same. It was a lie. He and I both knew how familiar I was with them. Yet, he just looked at his arm's display and looked back up without pressing the issue. He sat back and let out a long breath, looking in my direction. So, good news. Looks like nothing severe is going to be tacked onto the charges, and I hear you got a pretty light sentence in lieu of what you did. Mark expressed, a thin smile appearing on his face as he spoke. I think I scared him when I started laughing. His face turned to one of shock, and he instinctively curled his metal arm around his chest defensively, but Mark soon relaxed, his expression replaced with one of curiosity. Sorry, it's just funny. I got a work sentence. 10 years mining for Astris, either in the nebula or the asteroids. My choice, I expressed, a thin smile gracing my face. Makes me laugh. My punishment for trying to leave is doing a job I could have chosen here anyway. The only difference between a free citizen of Novus and I is that they get paid more, I finished, laughing one more time. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was rather bitter. Bitter sounding and bitter tasting. It was a laugh to let off a little stress, but perhaps I'd needed it. The tongue-in-cheek irony of being sentenced to work my way out of prison. A sentence that was effectively levied on every Nova citizen at birth. Mark got quiet and just stared for nearly 5 full minutes at his display. He seemed to zone out, his face utterly blank. The purple light from above, red light from his right, and green light from below, casting his form in 3 literal different lights, as he just froze. I turned to the dim ceiling, starting to close my eyes, hoping this little interview was over. I had a long 10 years ahead of me. But, of course, he spoke again, after a faint beeping sound from his arm. The room was so quiet I could actually hear his wrist motors turn as he moved. There is one last thing we need to do, Kitt. I need to interrogate you for the secrets of Blue One, all potential illegal technologies, and how you integrated the drive. But this will have to be done in person. As he spoke, he used his magnetic palm to pull the handcuffs from his belt. With a loud clank, they entered his hand, and he held them out. Hold out your arms, please. Mark, they're just going to tear her apart anyway. What do you need me for? I asked, a hint of resistance left, I supposed. Put your hands out, he repeated, sternly, shaking the cuffs. I don't get a choice in this, do I, Mark? I inquired, slowly extending my wrists towards him, realizing it just wasn't worth it to fight. No, Kitt, you don't, he concluded, clicking the cold metal over my wrists and tightening them firmly. He pulled me up, and I stood of my own power. No need to make him drag me around like a child. As the door opened and the EMAG shield disengaged, we walked out into the hall, a long metal hallway, covered on both sides by seemingly endless rows of doors just like mine, and up above, 2 thin Astris-purple neon light strips along the upper corners where the walls meet ceiling. As he pulled me along, I saw a few walls covered in long, winding bundles of piping, each one emitting its own unique sound, making the hallway contain an eerie, airy sound to it, as various liquids, air, and other substances passed through the labyrinthine tubes. Eventually, we passed through the guard station, and I spotted about a dozen people, all with those blue Asterisk Patrol uniforms. What struck me as so interesting was all their mods. One woman appeared to have entirely chrome legs, similar in design to Mark's arm, while the man she was talking to had his left eye replaced with a red, glowing lens, and some wiring trailing across his face from his eye socket to the back of his head. There was even more. A man with 2 robotic arms, a woman bald with the back of her skull entirely metal, and what appeared to be a metallic spine sticking out of her back. Then, a woman walked up to us, looking fairly human at first, until I realized her neck was laced not with veins, but with wires running down into her body. "Excuse me, where are you taking this prisoner?" the woman asked, her tone cold and direct, eyes fixated intently on Mark's face. "The prisoner confessed to contraband in his vessel. I'm escorting him to the impound lot to confiscate it. If you have a problem with that, I suggest you take it up with the commissioner." Mark's tone was professional, direct, and unwavering. I found it odd he lied about me confessing to contraband, but at this point, what's another year on my sentence? Her cold brown eyes flicked back and forth between his new rank badge and his face, before she simply nodded and walked away, never once even looking directly at me. Mark gave a harsh tug, and we walked past the many desks and paperwork-pushing cops in the room, and directly out the door into an enormous glass catwalk. The catwalk afforded a breathtaking view of the inner workings of this level of the pyramid. We must have been somewhere near mid to upper pyramid, judging by all the people in uniforms and suits walking on the many streets below. There were small buildings everywhere, and yet all was completely enclosed, as the many signs were all bathed in artificial sunlights, hover bikes buzzing by beneath us. The view of Asterisk's top pawns was short-lived, as I was led into a large structure, definitely big enough to be connected to the outer pyramid wall. A very bored-looking patrolman sat in the booth, banging the side of a screen he was watching. He couldn't have been older than 19, and as he turned to us, he immediately turned off the screen and stood up straight. How can I help you, sir?" the young man asked Mark, eyes wide. "I need access to a vehicle to search for contraband. Designation, Blue 1, he stated, his voice sounding a little deeper than usual. I got it pulled up right here. Says it's in the priority section. Ain't nobody allowed to touch it till the disassembly team gets here 4 nights from now," he informed us, scratching the scruff of his chin in thought. Mark put his cyber arm against the steel desk in front of the boy's booth, and began speaking slowly, very clearly. "This criminal's vessel is heavily modified. It may pose an active threat to the pyramid." "I'm sorry, Captain, I just can't let anyone in," he reiterated, nervously backing down. There was a loud crunch and the sound of creaking metal, as Mark closed his fist around the table edge, crumpling the steel as if it were paper. "Listen here, newbie. I'm on orders from Director Beckett himself, so I'll make it certain he knows it was you who stopped me if you do not let me in." This struck mortal fear into the poor kid, who immediately stammered out a response. Okay, right away, Captain." And, with the push of a few buttons, opened the gate for us and let us inside. We walked past rows of Astro cars, many with racing mods on them, some covered in burn marks, but most of them Astrovans and bigger vessels used for smuggling. They all stood neatly in their rows, resting upon the metal grate floor, a fair amount of steam pervading the room. Near the back, in a marked-off section, there she sat, Blue 1, looking gloomy in this dim, orangish garage light, the drive still sitting fused to her back. "What's the code to get in?" Mark asked, standing by the passenger side door. "It's 4733. I didn't even try to resist that one. We were already here, right? He entered the code and opened the door, jumping into the passenger side. "Well, get in," he ordered, as I slowly walked around her hood and opened the driver's side door. He used his magnetic palm's pull power to pull me in a bit faster, before closing the door behind me with the same ability, shutting his own a moment later. "All right, Kitt. First question. Any illegal propulsion mods?" I sighed. Technically, the Firebolt MX-2 was outlawed, so yes. It's a secondary pusher, used in the chase a few days ago. Rest of my jets are legal, I explained, a feeling of sickness entering me. It was like identifying parts of a relative's body. "Okay. Any secret compartments? He asked next, looking over something on his arm.
Yes, 3 in the back seat, 2 under the dash,
I replied, quietly. After a quiet boop sound, he spoke again. All right, finally. Any tools capable of getting through a standard 4-inch thick aluminum door? What? I asked, caught off guard by such a specific question. As I looked back over, his face had lost its green glow, and his arm display was now dark. The door to the impound lot. It's aluminoid and 4 inches thick. Got anything on here that could break through it? He repeated, as I heard a click from my cuffs.
What?
I stammered, looking back up at him. He cast a sad smile at me, pulling the bridge drive tape out of an evidence bag he had tucked under his uniform. It took me a moment to process what was going on. The tape in his hand, the blank screen, the remorseful, sad smile on his face. Then, as it hit me, my eyes widened, and a smile crept onto my mug as I replied to his question and switched the main power on.
Yeah, I might have something like that.
That concludes today's reading, and thank you for listening to my voice.